A couple things out before this lesson starts. You need to make sure that you have the warm-up paper. So there'll be a separate sheet of paper that says warm-up on it. So you need that because we're going to start with that first. And then you also need worksheet page 291. So get those two things out and ready. And then when you're ready, you can continue on with the lesson. So today we're going to learn about representing and organizing data. But before we start that, we're going to start with the warm-up. So put the warm-up page in front of you. All right, so the warm-up page. Harper, Luke, and Jolie either drive a car, truck, or van. Luke does not drive the truck. Jolie does not drive the car or the truck. Which does each person drive? So I want you to look really carefully because there's one person that's totally given away if you reread. And then you should be able to figure out what the other ones are. So once you're done with the warm-up and you figured out which person drives what, then you can move on to page 291 out of your workbook page. So do this job first if you need to pause the video until you finish and then play it when you're ready. All right, a couple of vocabulary things before we get started with the lesson. One of the words that you're going to see in here is a frequency table. A frequency table shows how many times events occur. So here's an example. So this is a frequency table. So you can see on over here, it says there's colors, there's tally marks, and then the frequency. The frequency just tells you how many tally marks there are. So it is another way to put information into a chart or a table. It's called frequency. So just kind of a fancy word for the number of times something happens. Using the same chart, I can show you, and I already told you, a tally chart. So a tally chart can be used to record and organize data. So instead of using numbers, they use tally marks. And as you notice there, if there's one black, there's one tally mark. But if you look at the blue, every 5, so after you get to 4, when you get to the 5th tally mark, you put a diagonal line through it. And that is so when you glance at that, you don't have to count all the tally marks. You know that when there's a slash through a group of 4 of them, that would be 5. So that's super helpful when you have a ton of tally marks. You can count by 5 for each of those diagonal slash tally mark groups because you know that they're 5. So every 5 there gets to be one of those diagonal lines. So you can see that black has 1, blue has 5, pink has 2, white has 4. You can see that that represents in the tally marks. And if you look over at the frequency, those numbers match up. The last vocabulary word is line plot. A line plot can be defined as a graph that displays data such as points or marks above a number line showing the frequency of each value. So a line plot is a line, and instead of writing numbers, they will use X's or sometimes dots to fill in the information. So you can see that this example line plot has to do with candy bars. The X's are the number of students, and then the bottom is the number of candy bars. So if we look at this, there are 3 students that had 3 candy bars. There are 4 students that had 5 candy bars. There are 2 students that had 6 candy bars. So it's just like another way to show information on a graph. So we talked about frequency table, we talked about tally marks, and now we talked about a line plot. You're going to be making all of them today in the lesson. All right, so we are going to start with page 291. Put that in front of you. And at the top it says the ages of some players on a basketball team can be shown in different ways. So all these different tables that you're going to see is the same information, it's just showed in a different way. So the first one is a tally chart. And we talked about a tally chart. You can see there that those are the different ages of the players on the team. And so there's 1 person that's age 7. There's 3 that are age 8. There's 5 age 9, 4 age 10, and 2 age 11. The same information is on the frequency table. Instead of tally marks, it's numbers. Same exact information, different way to show it. And on the last one, that's that line plot. Same information, just put with dots. So like I said, a lot of times you'll see X's and sometimes you'll see dots. So those are the ages of the basketball players. And you can see that there's one that's 7 years old, there's 3 that's 8 years old, there's 5 that are 9 years old, 4 that are 10, and 2 that are 11. Same information in the tally chart, frequency table, and line plot, just a different way to look at it. All right, so on page 291, I want you to use those tally charts, frequency tables, and line plots to answer the questions. Number 1, how many basketball players are 10 years old? You can look at any one of those to help you answer that question. They all have the same answer. So you're not adding them up. You just choose one way to look at it. So you can look at the tally chart to get your answer, the frequency table, or the line plot. Number 2, which age appears most often? I think on this one, you can really use any of them. I think it's really easy to look at that line plot because you can see which one is the tallest. So which number has the most dots? Again, you can use any of them that you want, but which age appears most often? Number 3, are there more players younger than 9 or more players that are older than 9? Now, notice what I did. I crossed off age 9. So if they're 9, it doesn't count. They're asking for, are there more players that are younger than 9 or more players that are older than 9? So 9 completely is taken out. So hopefully that will help you answer number 3. Number 4, write another question that can be answered by using the data displays. So write any question that you want. Choose one of the tables. You don't even have to tell me which one. Just ask a question. So here's an example question. You can't steal this one, but I could say, how many players are 8 years old and 9 years old? And then that would be a question that someone would have to answer. So do not use that one, but that's an example of a question you could write. All right, on the back side of your worksheet, I have already had some classmates' hand measurements. We are going to create line plots. We're going to make a tally chart, you're going to make a frequency table, and then you're going to use the data to make a line plot. So those are some measurements there in the board. So we have 7 inches, 8.5, 8, 8, 8.5, 7, 8, 6, 7.5, and 8.5. You're going to put that information on your worksheet in the tally chart, in the frequency table, and then eventually onto the line plot. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of it, and then some of it you'll have to do on your own, so pay attention. First of all, I want you to write in all the lengths. Now you'll notice the lengths are the same, nothing has changed, and I did put them in order from the smallest to the biggest. You don't have to do it that way, but I think it organizes it a little bit better. So there's 6, there's 7, there's 7.5, there's 8, and there's 8.5. So those go in both the tally chart and the frequency table. Then what we need to do is we need to make the tally mark and the number for the frequency table of how many times we see those numbers. So the number 6 only appears one time. So I put 1 tally and then I put the number 1 in the frequency table. The number 7 shows up 2 times. So I'd make 2 tally marks and then the number 2 in the frequency table. Remember, the tally chart and the frequency table are the same thing. It's just a different way to show the information. One's tallies, one's a number. All right, 7.5 only comes up 1 time, so I have 1 tally and then the number 1 in my frequency table. And then you're going to continue. How many 8s do you see? Go ahead and make the tallies and write the number. And how many 8.5s do you see? Make the tally and then the number. All right, now we need to take this information and put it into our line plot. So we're going to move all that information to the bottom. First of all, we need to figure out how to mark those little hashtag marks at the bottom. So if you'll notice, there's this goofy, I circled it in green. There's that goofy little break in the number line. And the reason that's there is because you don't have to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. What that little break means is you can jump to a number. So I can go 0, 15, 16, 17, 18. I don't have to count in order from 0 to the next number. So I can break it and jump to a number. So looking at the numbers that we have number 6, 7, 7.5, 8, and 8.5. We are going to number our line plot. So here's the numbers I chose. And the reason, I know we don't have a 6.5, but I put a 6.5 in there because then when you're counting, it makes sense. So we have a 0, we have a break in our number, we have a 6, and then 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5. So go ahead and number or your line plot at the bottom. And then you're going to put in, I'm going to use X's. You can use dots if you want to, but those are usually the most common that you see, either X's or dots. And I'm going to put in 1X for 6 because that's how many tally marks I have. You want to make your X's like the same size. So try to make them, don't make a huge X and a small X. Try to make them the same size. All right, the next information I have is 7. So I'm going to put 2 X's on the 7. And then you're going to keep going. So you're going to complete and put your X's or your dots in for the rest of the information in your tally chart or your frequency table. You can use either one. So keep stacking those on the correct numbers. When you're finished, look at your completed line plot and answer the following questions. So you're going to look, which length occurred the most often? So which one has the most X's or which one has the most dots? And then write a question that can be answered by using the data in your line plot. Again, any question that makes sense with your line plot. You can compare numbers, you can add numbers together, any sort of question. When you are finished, turn this into the basket and then look at the board for the next direction.